Hey, what's going on, everybody? So I'm hearing a rumor going around that the Lakers are interested in trading for DeMar DeRozan, and that the price tag would be Kyle Kuzma and Danny Green. Um, Obviously, I don't want to get up here and say that I'm in love with all three of their games, because I'm not. Kyle Kuzma has been a bit of a disappointment, even though obviously he helped us win a championship. Don't want to take anything away from him in that regard, but he didn't play his best basketball during the bubble, and really just hasn't lived up to his draft expectations. I wouldn't say stock, because I actually think he's lived up to the 26th pick or whatever, 25th pick, whatever that is. But as far as the upside that he showed us when he was breaking out, we just haven't seen that in his 3-year tenure. So I think the Lakers are ready to part ways. It's time to pay him. It's time for him to make some money, and I just don't think he's a part of our future in that regard. He hasn't quite fit in the way the Lakers would want him to be a third option on the team. And it may be just that time. He got a ring, hurrah! Now it's time for him to start his career um, with a bigger role elsewhere. Um, so I think the Spurs would be a great spot. Obviously, they have Popovich in place right now. I don't think Popovich will be the coach there much longer. They'll probably hire someone like Becky Hammond or someone of that caliber, and we'll see what the Spurs do um, if they decide to make that trade. That is. Danny Green, of course, is a guy who struggled during the bubble, but ultimately helped us win a championship as well. He's won 2 championships in a row. You can't take nothing away from a guy. 3 championships overall with 3 very different teams. So if anything, he's a lucky charm at this point. But his ability to run hot and cold, plus his price tag, may be a bit more expensive than what we want to pay going forward, given that we've had a full year sample size of what he can do. So I think the Lakers move on there. And, I'm not against trading either one of those guys, nor am I against bringing back someone of the caliber of DeMar DeRozan uh, with his ability to score the basketball, mid-range threat at all times. And he's an underrated three-point shooter, to be honest. He's had some decent seasons shooting the ball. We know his athleticism. He hasn't lost it. I'm not sure if he's quite the player that he was in Toronto, but I'm pretty certain as a third best player on your team, he can do a whole lot of damage, as he's always been able to prove that he's been able to do. A Toronto legend, DeMar DeRozan, a Compton legend, DeMar DeRozan. So I don't want to take nothing away from him, but I'm just not a fan of his game as it pertains to what his strengths and weaknesses are. He's not a particularly great defender. He's not a particularly great passer. So even though he's a superstar at scoring the ball and can do some other things, I've never been one to be a huge fan of his game. But I do like the player, the character of the guy. He seems like a very honest person. He said many times that he didn't want to fill the shoes of Kobe Bryant, that would be a little much for him. I respected that. And I didn't like how things went down in Toronto for him. So ideally, I'd actually like to see him go back to Toronto. But I don't know that he would want to go back there. And I'm not sure that they would have the role for him that he's used to having at this point. I think we are going through a transitional phase for a lot of players that we are used to seeing make perennial all-star teams and things of that nature. They're going to have to take lesser roles going forward, as every player does as their careers wind down, except for someone of the likes of LeBron James and Kevin Durant. But the majority of guys are going to have to take lesser roles just to fit the times, and I think DeMar DeRozan's entering that space. But I think it would be great for him to return home to LA and help the Lakers win a championship. I don't know that Laker Nation has forgotten some of the things that he said, and it did to a lot of us speak to him not being built for what it is that we are. But at the same time, when you have LeBron James and Anthony Davis, suddenly the expectations are not as high for him to play as well. Really, he just needs to be the third best player on the team, and if he comes in, he'll be just that. So, and for that price tag, you gotta love it. I mean, if it only costs us Kyle Kuzma, who's an underachieving player, surrounded by a class of players who weren't underachieving, a very good draft class, someone who hasn't lived up to his draft class status to a degree, has a disappointment, and a guy like Danny Green, who we could care less if we lose. Let's be honest. I think most Laker fans could care less if he's a Laker next year. Most of us were tired of him, pretty tired of him, not personally, but as a player. He ran too hot and cold. He wasn't helpful in some areas. as you would want him to be, et cetera, et cetera. We can live without him. We can find other shooters. We know that. Every Laker fan appreciates everyone who won a championship for us, whoever wore the uniform. And once you do, you're a Laker for life for sure. And some guys who didn't win, we look at as Lakers for life. You know, you can't tell me nothing about Eddie Jones, Nick Van Exel, and guys like that who may not have won with us, but I still don't look at the Lakers as the Lakers without their presence in our history. So there's exceptions to every rule. And I think with that being said, DeMar DeRozan would come in and immediately make an impact as somebody that we will remember as a true Laker if he's able to put on that uniform. His production is going to speak for itself, as it always has. He's a perennial all-star, and even if he has to take a lesser role, he's still going to thrive and excel in doing so, especially scoring the ball. So though it seems like my opinion of DeMar DeRozan is all over the place, the reality is I just don't know if I love him as a 1 and 2 guy. But as a 3 guy, hey, you're home free. So ultimately, if the Lakers do this trade, I think I'll have mixed feelings. Mixed feelings in the sense of giving up on Kyle Kuzma was something that I wasn't really ever on board with until basically now. And it does depend on what we're bringing back for him. If you trade him for like the 25th pick, I'm pissed off. But if you couple him with Danny Green and you trade him for a perennial all-star like DeMar DeRozan, suddenly it's not so bad. My thing is, if we can get DeMar DeRozan, can we maybe get someone else? That's my thing. He's not the first player on my list of players that I want. Now, is he the more realistic guy than some of the other guys I have on my list? Most definitely. You know, the people that I want playing shooting guard for the Lakers are like, I'll tell you exactly who I have in mind for us. I want to see Devin Booker be a Laker at the shooting guard spot. I want to see Bradley Beal. Even though I'm not a fan of his defensive prowess, he's a little more like DeMar DeRozan to me in some ways, but I still think he's just a younger version, and I would like to have him on this squad. CJ McCollum's a guy that I look at the shooting guard spot I think would fit in really well with what we do. So there's a couple guys I have in front of DeMar DeRozan for me, personally. Obviously, James Harden, if he ever were to become available, I would want him before I would want DeMar DeRozan. That's kind of stupid to say, obviously, but you know, you get what I'm saying. Like, if I'm to reach for the stars, why not reach a bit higher? And for me, I just want somebody who's a bit better than him at this stage. And DeMar DeRozan at times in the past has had a reputation for being a ball stopper. So has James Harden, but at least when James Harden has the ball, you know for certain it's going in. And he's drawing fouls and he's getting your best player off the floor because of it. So I don't know that the same goes for DeMar DeRozan, even though DeMar DeRozan is a fantastic drawer of fouls as well and shoots a free throw very, very well and at a high clip and has for a long time. So you know he can help you, but I just look at what he's been able to accomplish in the teams. This is my thing with DeMar DeRozan, truly. The teams that he's been on have always been accused of not having enough heart to face some of the best players that have ever played the game during the era. When they ran into LeBron, they got knocked off. When they ran to KD, they got knocked off. Like, it's just one of those things, you know, when they run into, just historically, LeBron has owned them something fierce. And part of the issue was the mentality of DeMar DeRozan, who was very open about being vulnerable about whether or not he could fill the shoes of a Kobe Bryant. But I thought that also spoke to the mentality of the teams that he was on and the fact that they didn't always meet the challenges in front of them with the type of effort necessary to defeat the teams in front of them, or at least to give them a good battle. They play great through the regular season, but when it came down to the playoffs and you're playing for something meaningful, guys like DeMar DeRozan would do nothing for you. And that's that Paul George kind of thing going on there. So it's for me, it's just like I don't really want to put a guy who has that type of reputation in this mix because we have such fantastic chemistry. I don't want nothing that will disrupt that. Now, from a personality standpoint, I think he'll be just fine, obviously. He's a vet in this league with a lot of friends, I'm sure. So that's not an issue. And he's home, so I'm sure he'd be happy. But when the going gets tough and we're in crunch time and we're staring down the barrel of a guy like Jamal Murray again, or looking at a guy like Jason Tatum who's coming at you, or et cetera, all these killers out there. I don't want a guy who has a reputation of not being a killer anymore. I don't want a guy who has a reputation of maybe being scared. A guy that maybe will be timid in the face of real pressure. I don't want to bring anybody like that in personally. If I'm a GM, I'm passing on DeMar DeRozan because of that reputation that he has with me. Just watching him play, watching his teams fizzle out, seeing them Toronto Raptors be called Barney every year in the playoffs. He was the guy on that team. He was the leader of those teams. So that's a problem for me. It's a pretty big one, actually. And I saw what happened in San Antonio. He went there and they ain't made the playoffs since. Like, they just aren't an average team. And when you have that type of coaching and you have the type of talent that San Antonio Spurs team has with Derek Wright and LaMarcus Aldridge and him and DeMar DeRozan, they should be able to at least make the playoffs with Coach Popovich's style of running teams. That's also a knock on DeMar DeRozan. You couldn't win with Popovich. Every single human being that ever played for Popovich was able to at least get him to the playoffs, with the exception of teams that just didn't have any roster talent on it that they may have had maybe once or twice in his tenure there. Aside from that, you give him two all-stars like LaMarcus Aldridge and DeMar DeRozan, they should be able to make the playoffs. They should be able to get at least into a position to look like they're going to make the playoffs. If they ain't going to make the playoffs, they should have been Phoenix. What we saw from Phoenix, that should have been the Spurs. And that speaks to DeMar DeRozan as well. So, yeah. Do I like DeMar DeRozan as a player? Not really. Do I like him as a character person? For sure. Do I think that the same thing that makes him someone that I respect, also someone that I don't really want in my team? Yes. The same thing that makes me respect him is the same thing that makes me not want him running my squad. That's what it really comes down to. It's just it's a humility about him that speaks to his limitations of what he believes they are, and I think that is a detriment. You got to be some kind of crazy when you're going up against great players. I want my guy to be more like Patrick Beverley and to not be as good as he thinks he is and be crazy about it anyway, than be like DeMar DeRozan, who is exactly as good as he thinks he is, and when he runs into players better than him, he bows. Period. We can't have that. We just, that's not what the Lakers are about. So that's my thing with DeMar DeRozan. I believe that's exactly what we'll see from him, even though we're going to be doing a whole lot of winning. He's going to be the perfect player in regards to being a third option because of the fact that he knows exactly who he is. He understands his limitations and he bows to them. So he ain't going to try to fight AD or LeBron for possessions. And speaking to that, I think you get a lot of Kyle Kuzma out of him based on that. Meaning, his numbers could dip from whatever he's averaging, probably 18 points. I could see it dipping down to 12 being a Laker. Because he's not going to take anything away from those guys. And he's not going to exert his will in a way that steps on anyone's toes. And we might find ourselves with a lesser version of a more expensive Kyle Kuzma. That's my worst fear with DeMar DeRozan. So, yeah, man, that's what I'm thinking. A better version of Kyle Kuzma based on his mentality, not his game. Not his game. He's refined his game. He's worked on his game. He's gotten better every year since he got into the league, and that's a perennial all-star. So I don't want people to misconstrue what I'm saying. I'm just simply saying the mentality of the guy. We know Kyle Kuzma could have been more assertive, but he didn't want to step on anyone's toes. We know he could have just put the ball on the floor and went head on, and whether success or mistake, be relentless about it. I'm kind of glad he didn't because he struggled a lot and it would have been to detriment of the team. But if you're as talented as DeMar DeRozan, you want him to kind of put on the afterburners. If we put Jamal Murray on this team, I still think Jamal Murray's going to score 30 points a lot of the games that he's in. Because he ain't going to care about Anthony Davis, LeBron James, because he believes in himself to that degree. Bradley Beal, same thing. I'd expect that from those guys. Same thing. You put a Dame Lillard on this team, you think Dame Lillard's going to stop shooting? Nah, he's going to score about 50 points whenever he wants. He's going to go for 60 whenever he wants. And LeBron James and Anthony Davis is going to be there along for the ride, because that's the type of ego that you want your player to have if they're going to be a part of this Laker thing right here. Remember. If you're a Laker fan, the one thing that we were accused of not having enough of was dogs. Real dogs. Now, we picked up some dogs in the not off season, but in the break. We picked up a couple guys like J.R. Smith, Dion Waiters, Rondo came back, Markieff Morris, of whom I want back on this team. Guys that I think would fall into the category of being quote-unquote dogs of the game. But when it really comes down to it, you do not want to bring in the opposite of that and further reinforce your own weaknesses. As well as you want to make sure that you're giving the right amount of money to the size around you. Meaning, you don't give a big contract or take on a big contract of a guard if you lose both JaVale and Dwight. You definitely need to replace them with centers. And you want to make sure those centers don't suck. And you want to make sure those guys are good enough to stay on the floor so that Anthony Davis does not have to play center majority of the time. That is very important. So, yeah, that's what I got to say, man. I like DeMar DeRozan. I want to bring in a shooting guard. Another guy that I didn't mention that I would love to have on the squad plays in Chicago. His name is Zach LaVine. I think he and DeMar DeRozan are comparable, but if I had to choose one right now, I'm going to go with the younger Zach LaVine, even though I think his contract's probably a little higher than DeMar's at this point because he just signed it. But that kid is his trajectory is still on the rise. A lot of people look at Devin Booker and forget that Zach LaVine and Devin Booker were like neck and neck on draft night and have both been really, really significant scorers in this league. And Zach LaVine is, like DeMar DeRozan, a highlight reel extraordinaire. He's probably the greatest bouncer of off the floor, probably since Sean Marion, maybe ever. I mean, the dude, clearly he has the best hops I've ever seen dunking the ball. But when it really comes down to it, he's not just a dunker. He's somebody who can score at a super high clip, and he can fit in a bit better, I think, than an older guy like DeMar DeRozan, in my opinion. So I don't know. I could be completely wrong about that. I don't watch a whole lot of Zach LaVine, to be honest. But from what I have seen from him, he's a bit underrated. And when he's healthy, though he's had some injuries in the past, when he's healthy, he plays at all-star level. So him and DeMar DeRozan, comparable, pretty much the same player if you ask me. Just one's a little bit younger. So, yeah, man, that's what I got. I could be wrong about that, too. I'm pretty certain DeMar DeRozan is a much better mid-range shooter than Zach LaVine, and I'm certain Zach LaVine is a much better three-point shooter than DeMar DeRozan, so I better put that in there and let people know that I know that. Anyway, that's what I got, man. Like I said, if DeMar comes in, I'll welcome him. I don't think he's going to be the reason we lose or anything stupid like that. But if Anthony Davis goes down and it's just DeMar DeRozan and LeBron James, I'm a bit nervous. I'm not going to lie to you guys. And I'm not as nervous if that guy's name is Bradley Beal or Booker, obviously. So do I think the Phoenix Suns would ever trade Devin Booker to the Lakers? I do not, unless he demanded a trade to the Lakers. Do I see him doing that? I do not. So I don't want anybody to think that that's possible in my mind. It's not. But I'm just thinking about who I would rather have at the shooting guard position than DeMar DeRozan if the opportunity were to arrive, which I do believe is possible if he demands a trade. If Devin Booker demands a trade, then suddenly we're looking at many opportunities for him to go many different places. So we're all hoping he does that. Although I would give Phoenix another year if I were him, because that team is projected to be better. For those of us who want to see him win and really be able to showcase his talent for something rather than just missing the playoffs and doing all this spectacular stuff that he does every year, we definitely want to see him be on the move this summer. So that's what I got, man. Shooting guard position is pretty important. It would be great if these guys were known for their defense, but none of the guys I mentioned, unfortunately, are defensive players. But when you have Anthony Davis on your team, you can get away with bringing in non-defensive players as to where other teams cannot, because you have an anchor in the paint that's probably old world and would be in every generation. So if anybody can afford to bring in a non-defensive guard, it would be the Lakers at this point. But you don't want to play around like that because guards do still run this league. So that's what I got, man. That's what I got. Another guy that just came to mind that I would love to see a Laker is Malcolm Brogdon. And, of course, Drew Holiday. I've made a whole video about that. Those are two names I would love to see guys be on this team at some point. So, yeah, man, it's just talking. Thank you guys for watching. My name is BDF44, and I'm out.